Hi, this is Drop the Mask, and obviously I'm Christy, and I am blessed to have my friend Kevin Donaldson on. Um, what if everything you've been told about who you should be isn't who you truly are? When do we find out who we truly are? Is it when we're elementary school, teenagers, young adults? When do we find out? Or do we just start putting those masks on as children because we want to be like the popular kids, or when we're in college because we want to be what we believe that we went into college to be, the degree. Um, so for me, I've learned late in life that dropping my mask got rid of my depression. And being a warrior for mental health, especially for men, I'm warrior for everybody, but this men have the hardest time because they're not supposed to be vulnerable. They're not supposed to be humble, and they're supposed to wear that mask and protect and serve. And to use that word, protect and serve, Kevin, his background is he's a retired police officer. No, you were a detective officer.
No, 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 no. I worked for a living.
Oh, okay, in Jersey, and he he wore masks, and struggled. And I know many first responders that have had to, because you're not supposed to tell, you're not supposed to share. But I have an odd feeling that the masks were already on when he went into the police force, um, because men are supposed to be the strong ones, and sometimes it's okay not to be so strong. You're allowed to have feelings. So, Kevin, share with me. Start with how you even thought about becoming a police, going into the police department.
The funny thing is I didn't. I had no aspirations to be a police officer. It wasn't for me. When I was younger, I was more on the other side of the law. I did about every wrong thing I could do purposely most of the time. Um, you your opening kind of inspired something in me, right? So, you know, um, I say this to my kids, and I found this out throughout my life, right? So there's a couple reasons why people wear masks, right? So why would somebody wear a mask? One of them is to fit in, right? As you said. One of them is a survival technique. It's you're trying to survive in chaos and you're not given any blueprint on how to do it. So if one thing's not working, what do? You change it. And even though if that's not who you are, you change it because you think that, okay, I got to make this life work somehow. But when you're young, you just don't have those tools. But here's the problem with young people. Okay, I'm going to sound like an old man now. I'm going to sound like my 50-year-old self. But if I go back to when I was 13, I knew everything. I was the smartest kid on the planet, and I knew exactly what was right and what was wrong. I chose not to do those things, but I knew everything. Everybody else was stupid. Then I got to be 18, and I realized, wow, I was really stupid at 13, but I know everything now. I got it. I got it now. I got it now. I got it. And then I became 25, and the same thing happened. And I became 30, the same thing happened. And somewhere in my early 40s, I said, you know what? This seems like a revolving door. This seems like a constant evolution. Now at 50 years old, here's the thing. Um, it's a pursuit. It's a lifelong pursuit to be able to drop the mask and find out who you are. There is no answer. There is no right answer to that because, especially for somebody like me, I have been what others wanted me to be for so long that I'm not really sure who I am. But here's the great thing. So here's the piece that I've actually come to later in life. It's the pursuit. The pursuit of finding out who you are. I think when you find that, when you finally get down to who you are, it's probably when you're going to check out of the earth because you accomplished a mission, right?
So, do you feel that you, at 50, you're still finding out and you're still evolving? Um, do you feel that wearing the mask protected you at times, especially being in the department? Um,
Well, yeah, because if you don't like who you are, and I never really liked who I was, so you put on something and you show people what you want them to know. From, for 40 years of my life, you only got to see what I wanted you to see.
right.
Okay. You didn't see all the other stuff. And listen, so, I recently just put out a post on, no, I have one lined up. Um, it's you never actually tell the truth. Nobody on planet Earth actually tells the truth. Do you I don't know if you're understanding
I
what
do.
I'm saying. Everybody always holds stuff back because it might not paint you in a good light. We're in a world of social media. There's nothing real on social media. Everything is a mask. Everything. People are taking pictures of all this delicious food and they're telling me how much they love their wife or how much they love their husband. And it's all fake because you find out a year later they're gone. They're divorced. That food was, whatever it was. Um, so everybody puts on that mask because they want to appear quote unquote normal. I'm at a point in my life right now. I don't know if I can say this on the air. I'm going to say
Go
it
for it.
anyway. I don't give a shit what people think of me. I really don't. Um, I am I am very vulnerable, but I'm also don't ever mistake that vulnerability for weakness because as vulnerable as I am, and if I tell you certain things, if that person disrespects me in any way, they get a punch in the face as quick as anything else. So I'm capable of that violence, but I've chose not to. I've chose to I've chose to let that out. But here's the cool thing: the more vulnerable I get, the more I connect to people.
Well,
Because
and vulnerability is powerful. Everybody always thinks vulnerable. Oh, they're vulnerable. They're weak. It's not. It's
so if I
when
sit
you're
here and tell
vulnerable.
you,
You're honest. You're showing that you want to connect.
okay, I'm gonna do a little exercise, and for the viewers, I want you to do this same exercise. All right. So I am Kevin Donaldson. I have a couple dozen life-saving awards. I've brought people back from the dead. Right. I have a lot of different arrests. I have some big drug arrests. I've investigated over 100 fatal motor vehicle accidents that led to probably 50 convictions. I have medals that I look like Patton if I wear all my medals. I have a successful podcast. I have a number one best-selling book. Now, when I tell you all those things, you feel like that distance between us.
Hmm.
Okay. But if I sit there and tell you that I was horribly beat as a child, if I tell you that I've attempted suicide no less than 8 times, if I tell you that I have been in mental institutions, you see that? You feel that? It's different. So,
Because
bottom line is,
you just dropped the mask, and you're
well,
allowing somebody to lean in to hear your story, experiences, and feel safe to say, "Hey, I'm broken too."
a wise man once told me that you impress people with your success, but you connect to them through your vulnerabilities. That's what
Hmm.
connects us to the world at large. Is what we have inside our weaknesses, because strengths they're a dime a dozen. The weaknesses, and when you let them out, you're letting somebody know that I feel they may have the same feeling as you, and all of a sudden that's just a connection. So I learned that I'd say within the last 5 years, I and it's so being a police officer, it's a very toxic environment because you get a bunch of cops together, and it's especially a couple guys. It's a constant game of one-upsmanship. It's like, well, I
Yeah.
arrested this guy and he fought me, and I had to arrest. And oh, that's great. And then the next person will go, well, I had to arrest two guys and one of them had a knife. And then the next go, well, I had to arrest three guys and one of them had a gun. And it just keeps going and going and going. And I don't engage in that. I really don't engage in that. I'm more interested to find out your times of doubt and how you got through it. I'm more interested in whatever adversity you had in your life. How'd you overcome it? Because I know the way that I did it. It wasn't may not have been necessarily the right way or the most efficient or effective way. It was the only way I knew. Um, but somebody out there might be in the place that I was and might hear it and say, "Hey, you know what? I got that too. Okay, I can listen to this guy. He's not full of himself." And
Right.
it took a long time to figure that out. It took a long, long time. But
Well,
police officers will shut down.
so well, because you found your peace through chaotic. Share the story of the shooting.
Oh, okay. So I was on for 13 years at the time. And you know, the town I worked in, we were about, if you know New Jersey at all, we were about 15 minutes west of Newark, connected by a major artery. So all of our crime came from the inner cities. And I loved my job, and I never looked for my job. I never sought out to be a police officer. I didn't take test after test like people in New Jersey. It's a very competitive job market. It sort of found me through some very odd circumstances. So my job was, I had two jobs, right? Our department wasn't big enough to actually have a full-time traffic bureau. Traffic was what I loved. I love investigating. It's like a giant math problem. I'm a big nerd when it comes to that. But my normal duties were patrol, safety, and in a small town, you have a tendency to get very complacent because you're not getting the repetitive, high volume stuff. You'll see a lot of it, but you're not getting the same thing as, say, somebody who works in one of the major cities. They're just going call to call of these awful things. And that's kind of what happened on July 10th, 2013. It was a Wednesday night. We were working what's called a pitman schedule, which is a 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift. And at the time, because of budget cuts in New Jersey, we didn't have dispatchers. Officers had to take a 4-hour stint on the desk. So your job in the middle of the week is pretty much to put the town to bed. You know, make sure everything's safe. You tug on a couple doors of the strip malls. You make sure they're all locked up. And that was basic Wednesday night. But this particular night, I said a word that is the absolute canonized no in police work. And that's the Q word. I said, this is really, really quiet. I pull up next to my partner and I said, God, I just, I'd rather have a burglary or just an alarm call or something. Just get me out of the car. But I had to go sit the desk at 11 o'clock. So prior to going into the desk, I start doing my checks. You know, we had to do a certain amount of checks. I go start doing it. And all of a sudden at the crack of the radio, start heading to this address, 911, unknown emergency. So when the 911 system was set up in New Jersey, you dial 911, an officer shows up, whether it's a misdial, dialed an error, or whether it's a real emergency, you got to go. That's the protocol. However, the address that we were sent to was in a townhouse complex, and we knew the address because there was ongoing domestic issues. A gentleman named Anthony Vocatoro was the recent ex-boyfriend of the resident of this address. So we kind of knew something was going on, but we didn't get really that much information from dispatch because what had happened is the woman, the resident, dialed 911 and threw the phone down. So the person behind it dispatch just sort of heard yelling in the background, and that's all he could give us. That's all he knew. So at about 10:30, I think a call came in at like 10:38 at night. I could tell you where I went. I could tell you the speed I went. I could tell you, we were doing about 70 miles an hour lights, no sirens, because you don't want to alert whatever's going on that of your presence. So we pull in, and what do? I do something really stupid. I pull up right in front of the house. No lights. I pull up right in front of the house. I leave my car running because you always left your car running. We go up to the door, and we can hear some arguing behind the door. Now, it's 911. I have to make contact with the resident. Whether I got to break into the house or not, I have to get in there to see what's going on. So I take the end of my mag light because it's a very distinct sound, and I hammer on the door. And all I hear on the other side of the door is, don't come in here, male voice, don't come in here, don't come in here. Well, my partner goes around the back. At this time, one of the supervisors showed up. He's standing behind me. I go to my car real quick. I get what's called a Halligan bar. Halligan bar is like a fireman's crowbar, and you use it to breach doors. If you know how you do it. Now, I've been asked this, like, why didn't you kick the door in? I've been asked this by people. And I said, because it's a steel door, and you don't kick in steel doors, you'll break your leg.
That's just in the
Yeah,
movies.
unless it's a closet door, you're not breaking it in. So on a on a he'll key up his mic. We had the signal all set up. He'll key up his mic, and he covers the back because there's only two egresses from the townhouse. There's the back sliding glass door and the front door. So he's covering the back door, and I'm on the cue. Here we go. I give what you do is you hammer on the lock, and then you get the pry bar in there and you pop it. It's a pretty easy technique when you know how to do it. So I get 3 hammers in, and I hear pop, 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 pop. It's gunfire. Sort of pull back, and this is not an everyday occurrence where I worked. It was a very odd. You're like, holy shit, this just what the hell? So you sort of retreat, and there was a little window, and we sort of retreat. But um, what had happened? I my first priority was find out whether my partner was okay, and what had happened was Anthony Vocaturo raised his gun. First, he had his gun pointed at the door, so whoever came in first was going to get it. And that was me. When he realized that everything was hopeless, he pointed the gun at the victim, at the resident, which was his ex-girlfriend, and he's about to shoot her, and my partner exchanged gunfire with him. Hit him once in the small of the back, through a sliding glass door. It was actually a really, really good shot. I find out my partner is okay. And at this time, other units are starting to arrive from surrounding towns. It was a pretty hot call.
They're not used to something like
No,
this.
no, not where I was. Not. I mean, it happens. It's happened several times, but it's
Right.
not something that happens every day. So when I went around the back, um, so the lieutenant that was behind me, and then a sergeant showed up, and it's me and my partner, and we go on a deck, and the privacy deck in a townhouse. It's got it's like 4 foot tall. It's got the wood slats, and it's probably 9 or 10 foot by 10 foot, somewhere in that neighborhood. So it's not that large. You can see through the sliding glass door. I can see the victim. She's seated up against a wall with her knees to her chest. I can't see this guy. I have no idea where he is. Um, my assumption was he retreated upstairs because it was an open floor plan, so you could see. It was like a little breezeway up top where you could see. But it seems logical that he went up there. The funny thing is we developed this plan. Now, when you're in a critical incident like this, you have to develop a plan very quickly on the fly. It's not like you have hours to plan it. You just got to do it. So 3 of us decided to go onto the deck. The entrance is over to the right. I go over to the left because in my mind it was the most tactically sound position because I could see everything. I could see the victim, I could see the whole room, I could see everything. There was a little bit of cover. It was lawn chairs. It was like lawn furniture, metal lawn furniture. Um, Not the best cover, but it was the best we got. But I noticed the victim isn't looking at us, even though we're making noise. She's looking over to her right, and she's just staring off to her right. So our plan was we were going to take one of the lawn chairs, throw it through the window, make entry, get the victim, and get out of there. Once the victim's out, then it's game over. So my partner, who is off to the left, takes one of the chairs, throws it through. There's 2 guys off to the left, and I'm off to the right. As soon as that chair goes through the window, glass goes everywhere. I see this really, really intense, bright flash. I hear this very loud bang, and it feels like somebody's taking sand and just throwing it in my face. Well, what he did was he was behind one of the columns right next to the sliding glass door, and as soon as that chair went through, he stuck his gun out and fired a round. The
Yeah.
round it wiggled my ear. That's how close it came to me. I was quarter of an inch from not being here. But I hit the ground, right? The guys over to the left, they were able to retreat because the stairs are right there. I'm trapped. I'm in what I thought was the best position. I am in the worst position possible. I'm stuck. Right. So while I'm on the ground, I see all this blood. Mind you, I didn't know that the bullet wiggled my ear. I felt something, but I didn't know. I see all this blood on the ground. My shoulder is killing me. And the guys behind me are asking if I'm shot, and I said I don't know. I tell them there's a lot of blood, and you know what, I'm stuck. So the funny thing is when you go through something like that, you never know how you're going to react until it happens. there are those people who run away, and that's your human instinct, okay? Oddly enough, one of those people that was with me ran so far away and left me for dead, and that's one of those things that I'm actively working on trying to forgive somebody. But he left me for dead, and that was his job to sit there and protect. But two guys thankfully stayed, and I know I can't get out. If I crawl past that broken sliding glass window, he has a clear shot. He is going to kill me. He shot at police twice. Why wouldn't he do it again? So everything slows down. I'm super calm. I'm not fearful. I'm not anxious. I'm not panicking. I am as lucid as I've ever been in my entire life, and I'm thinking very clearly. Um, what I think about first is my wife at home. Okay, she's going to be the wife, the widow of a police officer who went down in the line of duty. This is how my mind's working. And just to give you an idea how lucid I was, is cops will keep their keys back when cars did have keys. They'll keep their keys on top of the radio antenna. When I hit the deck, when I went down in a prone position on my stomach, my keys fell off, and I heard them and I saw them. I slowly picked up my keys, put them back on my antenna, and my gun's out, and I get in a shooting position. But then I start thinking about my kids. And now at the time, my oldest was 3 and my youngest was about 7 or 8 months. My oldest will know who I was. My youngest will never know who I was. He'll see pictures of me, and that's going to be about it. And my oldest will have vague memories. I got a great picture of my oldest sitting in my police car with me on my lap, wearing my hat. It's like kid crack, police cars. Um, and I said, okay, well, I'm preparing myself to die. Okay, I know that I'm about to get into a shootout, and I know it's probably not going to end well. So I have to make my peace. I make my peace with everything, and I said, you know what? Listen, if I'm going to die, you're coming with me. That's my rule. You're going to come with me. So I get in a shooting position, and I'm trapped there for probably, in the reality, of about 2 minutes, but it feels like an hour. Feels like you're trapped there forever. Now, thankfully, there were some guys that didn't run away. They were true to their word. What had happened was one of the guys who was there, he covered the stairs, he covered everybody. So as soon as he poked his head out, he was getting hit. And the other guy, now it doesn't appear it on camera. I know I got a swimmer's body, but I'm not a fast crawler. I'm not very light on my feet. I am not going to be able to do this on my own and get out. So what had happened was, when my partner reached over the railing, grabbed the back of my duty rig, and assisted me and got me off. So when I got off, we're still looking, and we're still now. I don't have time to rest, see if I'm shot. I don't have any of the time.
Yeah, because you don't even know if you're
I
shot.
don't
You're
know
just,
anything. But what I can do is I'm looking. I'm still my gun. I still got my gun up, and I'm still covering it. And I watch the victim like a thief in the night. She stands up against the wall, slides against the wall, and goes out the garage. Because what had happened is, after he shot, he went upstairs. Actually, the other guys saw him go upstairs. So she gets out, victim's out, game over. He could stay up there for 10 years. It doesn't matter. And then you're doing one of these, right? You're like, and I find out the blood is coming from my arms. When we threw the chair through the glass went everywhere. And
yes.
I went down like this on my forearms, and I still to this day have some glass in my left arm that they just can't get out. It's in a bad spot. Doesn't bother me. It's not a big deal. I wasn't shot. My shoulder, I must have hit it on the way down, so it was all good. It was like a really good job. But it's July and it's hot, and I'm standing there, and I have glass. I have all this glass in my arm, and we have to hold perimeter for 2 hours until the state police teams unit, which is their version of the SWAT team, shows up and relieves us, and the hostage negotiator. After that, I was made to go to the hospital. I didn't want to go to the hospital, but the funny thing is this is 2013. I did not carry my cell phone with me everywhere I went. We weren't tethered to our cell phones the way we are today, 12 years later. So my cell phone is sitting in the running car, sitting directly in front of the residence, that I can't get to, because if he's on the upstairs, he can look out the bedroom windows and take a shot.
Right.
So now I'm stuck. And if there's one thing you want to know about police wives is they talk. They all talk. They're all in group chats and whatever the heck they were doing. And I was always very fearful. It's about 12:30 at night, a little after then, and I was always very fearful that one of the other wives are going to say, "Hey, there was a shooting in Roseland. Is your husband working?" Well, yeah, and I can't get a hold of him. So that was after the incident, and I got into the ambulance. That was what was going through my mind. My wife's number is the one number that I know off the top of my head, and I couldn't tell you anybody else's. So I grab one of the EMT's phones. And I say, I need to call my wife. So I call her, wake her up, and I thought I was doing the right thing, and I wrestled with this a lot. I said, "Hey, hon, I was in a shooting. I'm okay. I'm not shot. I have to go to the hospital. I got some glass in my arm. I'll call you when I can. I don't have my phone with me." Click. "Oh, by the way, go have sweet dreams. Yeah, go right back to bed."
Right.
So the thing I wrestle.
But you don't know what you don't know when you're in that situation. Now you can sit back and go, I would have handled this differently. But when you got to the hospital, didn't the nurse say something to you?
No, no, that night so that night everything was fine. Everything was cool. I was very proud of the job. I was very proud of my reaction in that situation. I didn't run away. I didn't panic. I did exactly what I was supposed to do. I did my job. I did what I was paid to do. Um, I get out. I come. They talked him out or whatever. I get all my stuff and I go home. I get home at about 5 in the morning, and I am on level 12 out of 10 of adrenaline. So first
Yeah.
thing I do is I go out for a run. I try to run some of this adrenaline out of me. That didn't work. I go walk my dog. That didn't work. Um, Finally, I laid down. I turned my phone off because it was just ringing off the hook because cops are always wondering what goes on when they're not there. Um, I think I maybe got in a half hour to an hour. I didn't get much sleep at all. I couldn't tell you how much I got. I wake up to my phone is still blowing up, 50 messages. What happened? What happened? What happened? So I get back to as many people as I can. Now, when I got home that morning, I have never hugged my wife harder. I've never hugged my kids harder. I was just grateful. I'm sitting here with bandages on my arm. My wife is overjoyed that I'm home. Well, maybe not. I mean, she would have got a nice payday if I didn't make it home.
Stop.
Um,
Stop.
so we plan on like a date night. Just sort of a little quiet celebration. We go out to dinner and a movie, right? Um, Dinner was fine. We go to the movies. We watch a movie, and it was back when Seth Rogen used to be funny. There was the first movie that he wasn't funny in was this movie. It was called This Is the End. And if you watch that movie in the very beginning, it's kind of like the apocalypse happens, and there's this big. So there's a part where there's a big bang and these flashes of light, and certain people get sucked up, and certain people stay on Earth. The ones that get sucked up are saved, and the ones that stay on Earth are the ones that are in hell. Well, the flash and the bang did something to me. It really it jostled my nervous system. I never had anything like this. My heart starts pounding. I'm dripping sweat. I can't breathe. Now, mind you, my wife's sitting right to the right of me, and she's been through enough. Like I can't sit there and worry her again, and I have no idea what's going on. So I excuse myself. I say, "Listen,
So you put on a mask.
you have to. It's a survival technique, and you're trying to do it to protect somebody else." I get up. I say, "I got to go to the bathroom." I go out the door and I sit in the hallway, and thankfully nobody was in the hallway because I had what I now know is an out and out panic attack. I couldn't breathe. I'm sitting there. I'm just pouring sweat, and I know my wife's inside. I know she's going to start wondering where I am. And every time I go to pull the door to the theater, it feels like it's 500 pounds. I can't get the door open, so I just sit down and I'm breathing. I'm using every technique that I ever heard. I'm deep breathing, whatever it was. So after about 15 minutes, my wife comes out and she says, "You okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, whatever we ate for dinner." I'm lying. I'm a totally lying to her. I'm like, "Whatever we ate at dinner didn't agree with me. My stomach hurts." And I think I fooled my wife, but my wife's smarter than everybody thinks, and she knew something was off. So she takes pity on me and she says, "You know what? This movie sucks. Let's go home." So we go home. Well, that night, the nightmares started that night, and the nightmares are something like, you pull out your gun and the magazine drops out and all your rounds go everywhere, and you got to pick them up. It's like that chaotic confusion dream where you pull the trigger and a bang flag comes out like in the cartoons. Sweating. Now I would wrestle around. I was sweating so bad in my sleep that I actually had to either do a clothing change, or I actually checked, and this is I know it's sort of a joke, but it's the truth. I actually checked to see if I wet my pants. That's how wet I was. And it was just the nightmares lasted a long time. But so that's Saturday. The next Saturday, so this happened on a Wednesday, early Thursday morning. Um, the movie theater was Thursday night. So that Saturday, my wife says, "Let's take the kids down. We'll go see your parents." My parents lived in South Jersey. I was like, "All right." So the whole drive down, I'm quiet. I'm very introspective. I'm trying to figure out what's going on because I can't sleep. I'm exhausted. I got these horrible nightmares, and all I'm thinking about is that bang, bang, bang. Well, we get down there, and my brother's a police officer too, so he's trying to ask me what's going on, and I just keep going, "Dude, I don't want to talk about it. I'm okay. I just don't want to talk about it." So we get ready to leave. Now my 3-year-old has some chocolate milk. He spills chocolate milk on his car seat. You would have thought he burnt down my house. I started screaming at a 3-year-old. I like that, like boom. There's no ramp up. It's 0 to 100. Now, what's a good mother do? A good mother is always going to step in front and take the damage for the child, and that's exactly what my wife did. But I didn't care who the target was, so she got it. Now, if you've ever driven in New Jersey, there's two major arteries going north and south. One is the Garden State Parkway, one is the New Jersey Turnpike. They're both about the same size. Some places there's 6 lanes. It is a major highway. People will do 80 or 90 miles an hour on a good day there. My wife is begging me. She's begging me to pull the car over so she can stand on the side of the Garden State Parkway with a 3-year-old and an 8-month-old. That's how bad it was in the car. So I know something's wrong. Something's broken. I call that night. I call one of those. I call a helpline, and they hook me up with a therapist. And it just so happens I know the therapist that they hooked me up with because he lives in the town that I was working in. And turns out it was a godsend because he actually saved my life many times. But the incident you're talking about with a nurse, so that was the first time after the shooting that somebody showed me humanity. So I have to go into the like one of the medical places that they're sending me, one of the workers' comp places. They have to get some more glass out of my arms.
So during this time, you were just shielding yourself. I'm fine. I'm fine.
Sure.
Even though you knew that you were struggling, but you didn't know the name of what the struggle was.
I'd never experienced stuff like this. Like this is
Yeah.
something foreign. I've seen dead body after dead body, and dead bodies don't bother me. I've seen man's inhumanity to man, and that doesn't bother me. For some reason, this got me. Okay, this got me, and I was so new in it. I understand it now, but I didn't understand
Yeah.
it then. So when I go to the nurse's office, I am exhausted. I haven't slept in 3 or 4 nights, not more than a couple hours. I was a wreck. So she's picking glass out of my arm. She's putting this little needle probe in there and picking glass out. And when she gets out as much as she can, she turns to me and she says, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, it's just glass in my arm. It'll be fine. They'll heal." She goes, "No, that's not what I'm talking about." I said, "Are you okay?" However she said it, I broke down. Like I just, I broke down and I said, "No, I'm really not okay." I got tears in my eyes. I'm bawling, crying. And I said, "I don't understand what the hell is going on with me. I can't sleep. I just keep thinking about this." Um, my kids were nearly fatherless, and my wife was nearly a widow. And she looks at me and she comes over and she breaks that protocol and she gives me a hug and she says, "Well, you're not going back to work." Now, my department, you're supposed to have what's called a critical incident debriefing, no more than 72 hours after the incident. Now, this is Monday. My department, like most departments, don't give a shit. When you
Right.
become a police officer, the old timers will tell you, "Hey, listen, if you're having any problems in your head, don't tell anybody. Just go to the bar." When
Yep.
we used to go to a bar, we used to call it church. They'd say go to church. Um, So this Monday, they finally schedule a critical incident debriefing. We sit down there. There's something seriously wrong with me because now, if you go back a year, they took our shotguns out of our cars. We always used to carry shotguns above our head.
Mhm.
They took our shotguns out of our car because somebody left a live round in there, whatever. I've been shooting a shotgun since I was about 5 years old. I know what I'm doing with those things. But I hear one of the lieutenants say, "Hey, we're going to get the shotguns back in the car." So I'm happy about that. I'm like, "Oh, great! Maybe some good's going to come out of this. This is a good thing." And then the second part of that came out where, yeah, it's only going to be in the supervisor's cars. I start yelling and screaming at my superior officer, where there was a bunch of guys in there. They picked me up, they walked me down the stairs, and they put me outside because I was going to get fired. I lost my mind. I really did. I started screaming and yelling like a maniac. And then the downward spiral, I knew I wasn't going back to work. The nurse says, "You're not anywhere close to being okay to go back to work." And that's when the downward spiral started. Because the worst thing when you're in that kind of mindset to do is nothing. And that's what happened to me. And subsequently afterwards
So,
it got worse.
so through all that time, your family, your friends, they thought you were just fine, even though you were acting out. That's the only word I can use because they didn't know what they didn't know, but you didn't know what you
My
didn't know.
wife knew my
Am
wife
I?
knew something was off. My wife absolutely.
Well, I mean, I understand that she knew, yet you had that mask on. That it's like I'm keeping this wall between. If that makes sense, I'm keeping this wall, so I'm not going to talk to you, or I'm not going to. I have to be this certain person.
So think about the traditional role of a man. Going back
Mm-hmm.
millennia, it's to be the
Yep.
protector. We're not the ones that
Yep.
that have time to cry. We don't. We
Correct.
My favorite line was said by in Predator was Jesse Ventura, and he gets shot, and he goes, "I don't have time to bleed." Well, that's kind of encapsulates a man pretty well. Um, I also think about it this way: is I took the job as a police officer. My wife did not. Okay, this is not her burden to bear. This is my burden to bear. She signed up to be my husband or my wife, yes, but she did not sign up for any of this damage. So I have to do my best to just figure this out on my own. And that's pretty much been my life. It's everything I've ever done in my life. I just had to figure it out on my own. I never had really a good support system. So that's what I was going to do. Um, I drank more alcohol than you can possibly imagine. I drank so much alcohol that I was happy when they gave me Klonopin to calm down my anxiety because I could get drunk cheaper. This is very dangerous, what I'm about to tell you. Uh, the mixture of a benzo and alcohol can kill you. Many people have died from
Mm-hmm.
it. I used to take 3 or 4 Klonopin, and tequila was my drink, and I drank tequila and
Because you're numbing yourself.
self-medicating.
You're numbing.
Yeah, I'm
Yep.
anesthetizing myself. Um, and it it made it so much worse, and there was just this progression of this downfall. I was not that person that I always wanted to be for my wife. I felt weak, I felt emasculated. um, I stayed up all hours of the night, and it just progressively got worse and worse, um, until the first real incident. I couldn't take my youngest son crying. He's 8 months old. I couldn't take it. Like every time he cried, I had to walk out of the house. Now, my 3-year old, I gave him all the toys that I had as a kid. He had Nerf guns and stuff like this. Well, one day he's in his room and he's playing with his Nerf gun, and he turns around and he points the Nerf gun at me. Now, there's a maneuver police will do when somebody's pointing a gun. You do it so repetitively, it's second nature to you. You just grab it and you turn it and you disarm, you pull back, and then you have the gun. I did that to my 3-year-old son after he pointed a Nerf gun because it was just boom. And I saw that look on his face where kids will get this look when they get scared. Like there's two reactions a child will have. They'll either burst out crying, or they'll get this like they'll freeze. It's that fawning. They're just like with the blank look on his. And that's the look my son had, and I'll never forget that look. I took the gun. I have the gun in my hand. I'm looking at his face. I break the gun in two. I throw it in the garbage. And then I walk out of my house. I don't say anything to my wife. I get in my car. I drive. I take my cell phone. I turn it off. I put it in the glove box. And I park my car and I walk 2 miles into a wooded area and I just go into the woods. Now, here's the scary part. This is probably 2 or 3 weeks post shooting. I started because I wasn't sleeping. I was getting real paranoid. I just, for whatever reason, I never carried my off-duty weapon, never, unless I was going in a bad area. I started carrying my weapon. I always used to carry it on my ankle. So I was carrying my weapon. I'm walking into the woods, and I stayed there for about 3 days, sitting up against a tree, never slept, survived on a bottle of water, and I just sort of had to. I don't know what my plan was at that point. I think it was just to figure shit out. But that's where I sat. I sat there for 3 days. And after 3 days, I walked out of the woods. I'm like, this is, all right, I got to go. Walked out of the woods, got my car, came home, acted like nothing happened. Just walked into my house. But it just continued to go on and on and on. And one night at about 2:30, I'm sitting downstairs watching TV. I lived in a bi-level, so my family's upstairs. And I had an office, which is just a converted bedroom, downstairs. I walk in there and I just said, you know what, I had enough of this. I can't do this no more. I'm turning into a monster. I'm scaring the hell out of my family. I'm destroying my relationship with my wife because thought action comes out. Like if I get mad at her, I call her every name in a book. I actually spit at my wife. I spit in her face. That's how bad it was. I was throwing remotes at her. I was a monster. But I didn't want to be this monster, right? So I go in my office. I take out my off-duty gun, which is it's a Smith & Wesson Chief Special 38. It's nickel plated. I have it all customized. I have a bigger grip on it because my hands are big. I write a note. I write down all the bank passwords. And it's time to go. I'm like, all right, we're going to do this. I have to remove myself from the equation so I don't do any further damage. This is what my mind is. So I don't do any further damage to my family. Well, I say my piece. I put the gun in my mouth. I can still feel the ridges on the trigger. I can feel the ridges on the hammer because I cocked the hammer back so it becomes single action. And I put the gun in my mouth. And I keep the gun in my mouth for about 20 minutes, and I'm praying that, even though I had no faith, I'm actually praying that just give me a reason not to do this. Just I don't want to do this, but this is the only answer. And as I'm talking, there's more and more pressure getting put on the trigger. It's more and more pressure, just waiting for the pop to happen. And then they'll be free of me. That's how I was thinking. So I'm going through the incident. I'm saying I'm sorry to everybody. I'm sorry I'm not the man I was supposed to be. I'm sorry I never did the right thing. And, I'm apologetic. Something happened. And I didn't fully understand. I know now, but I didn't fully understand it then. I just had this pause. I take the gun out of my mouth, and I'm holding the gun in my hand, and it felt like a lead weight. And I had this brief moment of clarity, and I said, "Oh my God, I damn near blew my head off in my house with my kids sleeping upstairs and my wife upstairs. My kids could have found me, or my wife would have. One of them would have found me, missing half my head because I had hollow points in there. And then all of a sudden I would be creating generational trauma. I didn't think about any of that stuff, and people in that place,
You don't
the
think.
same person is going to say, "How could you do that?" And I'll tell you what. I'll tell you why you think that way, or why somebody thinks that way, because you're thinking very rationally, and you're trying to put a rational spin on an irrational action. I was about to make a temporary condition a permanent solution. I never told anybody. I never told my wife that any of that stuff. But when I woke up the next morning, I took my gun and I put it in a lockbox. I called the one guy I still talk to at the police department. I said, "Hey, listen, man, I got my gun in a lockbox. I'm just going to bring it to your house." I had to be vulnerable enough to do that. And without question, he said, "Okay, I'll meet you here." Done. Took my gun, and he kept my gun for 6 years. He had my gun for.
Did you feel like you took a layer
I
off
didn't.
to share that
I
with him?
didn't.
You
I.
hadn't taken you didn't take the layer
It's
off?
amazing. It's amazing how desperate you will be, where you don't want to take that layer off, but you have no choice because I could not keep my gun. I
Right.
could not be trusted with my gun. Um, but there's many different ways to skin a cat. I tried to hang myself. I took a lot of pills. I tried to drink myself to death. I tried to hang myself several times, but I'm heavier than I think. So one of the times I put the rope around my neck and I was in the garage. I put the rope around something and the rope broke. So I choked myself out and then I hit my head on the ground and I woke up about 3 hours later with a massive headache. But so here's the problem. Now I'm a complete failure. I'm a failure at life. I'm a failure at police work. I'm a failure with my family. I can't even take my life. I am a failure at that. That's how much of a failure you feel, and especially when you attempt suicide and don't succeed. But you're not thinking clearly. You're not thinking about anybody else. Those walls close in, and you don't see. All you see is like right in front of you, and your peripheral vision is about here. You're not thinking about the people you're leaving behind. All you think about is, I am a burden. I want to go. So fast forward, it's just more of the same. You know, I was told that I could no longer be a police officer. I was told by my doctor, he's like, you can't. And how he did it was pretty interesting. This same therapist that I knew, his name's Dr. Eugene Stefanelli. Um, he he's a crazy old Italian from Newark. Like if you watch The Many Saints of Newark, that's where he grew up. He's 80 years old. He brings in a gun. He's a gun fanatic, right? He brings in this 1945 Colt 45 with the Bakelite handles, World War II model, and it is a beautiful gun. And I've been handling guns my whole life. I had no fear of them. So he says, I'm thinking of selling this. What do you think? Obviously, it was unloaded, but he's kind of crazy, right? And he says, what do you think of it? And he hands me the gun. Now, mind you, I don't want to seem any less masculine than I already feel. So I take the gun and I just sort of look at it. I sort of just hold it in my hand. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. That's awesome. And I couldn't get it out of my hand fast enough. And he tells me now, because I just saw him the other day, he tells me now, he goes, that was the moment I knew you were done police work.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's a scary proposition. I put my life into police work. I love that job. I thought that was the greatest job in the world. I was helping people. I was making a difference. I was making an impact. And it's gone. The one thing I knew, though,
But it,
go ahead.
but it wasn't your journey. Your journey wasn't ending. And you mentioned that you had your faith wasn't strong, even though you prayed.
I had no
And I'm going to
faith.
bounce around. You had no faith. I'm going to bounce around a little bit here.
I had no faith.
Um, and it's amazing. God knew that. And so you went to therapy or a group therapy, and you met another police officer that was going through it, going through his own. You knew him before.
Yeah.
And do you believe that where you walked when you started, well, you started it before you met Mike, um, and we'll share the podcast and everything that, but do you feel that you started the podcast for your own therapy?
So I started the podcast before I brought Mike in. I didn't bring Mike in until September 9th. But Mike and I knew each other for about 25 years. I used to work with his brother before I was a cop. And I would know Mike to say hi to him, but I didn't know him.
And if nobody knows what his podcast is, it's called the Suffering Podcast, but we'll go into that. But yeah, go into that story
So
if you don't mind.
I go through retirement, which is this whole other ball of stress. I go to rehab. All right, I get cleaned up. Um, and I just work towards. I got to retire. I work towards retirement, and I retire. I'm grateful that the way I retired, that I was able to get my pension, to be able to support my family. But it's scary now. Now at 39 years old, I have to find a new life. I have to find a new identity. I have to reinvent myself because I don't know who I am, right? I don't know. I really don't know who I am at this point. Now, one of the things I do know is while I was in group therapy, there were some people, some really important people to me that helped me along. And they made me see that the feelings that I was having and what was going on in me, I wasn't unique. I wasn't, this is, my story is not unique in any way. They were all experiencing the same things as I was. So there's a lot of comfort in shared trauma, and that's sort of what got me through it. So I retire on June 1st, 2014, officially retire. But I made a commitment that um, when somebody helps you, especially in your darkest of times, that help comes with some debit. Like you don't pay them back. You pay it on to the next person. It's not free. There is nothing in this world for free. Everything is transactional. In this case, the transaction was I have to make sure I do what they did for me to another person. So I stayed on in group therapy until one day in about October of 2014, see this guy walk in. I was like, oh my God, it's Mike Felice. I was like, I don't know if you remember me or not, but I used to work with your brother Frank. And, we met a couple times. And he goes, oh, yeah, I remember. And you could see that look in his eye because I had the same look. Like you can identify when somebody's gone through something similar to you just by the look on their face. So from that moment on, I said, Mike, I actually took his phone and put my number in his phone. I said, we're going to talk and I'm going to call you every single day and we're going to get through this. I've been where you are. I know where you are. And we did. And Mike and I became super close during group. And we found a lot of comfort in group. So at some point in group therapy, I walked away from it. All right. I said, you know what? I can't do this no more. I had to walk away from it. I had to clear my head. I had to do all that stuff. And then the infamous lockdown happened, right? Um, lockdown was a strange time. And in the constant pursuit, uh, it's eternal vigilance is the pursuit of ultimate intelligence. And I'm always on that pursuit. I always had a hunger for knowledge. I always a hunger to learn more. And I started listening to podcasts because that's pretty much all you could do. You watch TV and listen to podcasts. We were home, and I was like, you know what? I think I can do this because by this time, the guy who shot at me, Anthony Vocatoro. If you were to first 4 or 5, maybe 6 years after the shooting, if he were to come face to face, I hated him. I couldn't stand him. But at some point, I don't know exactly when this happened. I said to myself one day, I said, what did this guy have to go through to shoot a police twice? What kind of pain was he feeling? And when I did that, I took all his power away from me. I didn't have,
Right.
all that anger just sort of just washed off. And going through group therapy, I also realized that every time I told what my story was, especially when somebody new came in so they'd understand that I'm getting what they're talking about, I felt better. But what I came to realize is that shooting event in July of 2013 was not a bad thing necessarily. You're always put in a position that you're supposed to be. I was supposed to be in group therapy when Mike walked in. I was supposed to be on that deck on July 10th, 2013. I was supposed to do all this stuff because while it's painful, it kind of gets you to the place where you need to be. But so during lockdown, I figured, you know what, I'm going to start a podcast. And I don't tell anybody because I'm not that person. I don't tell anybody because what if it sucks? If it sucks, I don't want anybody to hear it. And I started with a guy I know, kind of a harebrained idea. We were recording in my basement where I am right now, as a matter of fact. And so the guy I started with stayed with me for 2 episodes. And then he sort of flaked out and he said, you know what, I don't want to do this no more. I said, okay. So I made a mental commitment to myself. I'm going to put out a show every week. So I sort of limped through it until one day I'm at work and I call up Mike because I hadn't talked to him in about 6 months. Say, Mike, how you doing? What's going on? Listen, I started this show. Why don't you come on? We'll sit down and talk. And on this table that this whole setup is on right here, this is him and I sat across from one another. And it was so freeing and it was so pure. And we had this energy between us. And it was I remember the way I used to record is I would record and then I'd go in my garage, I'd go through the audio with a fine tooth comb, and then like a week later I'd put it out. I'm sitting
And like me, I just let it go.
I have a little bit of my wife calls me anal, so you know. But this particular back and forth exchange between Mike and there was something there. And I remember calling him up right after I got done doing it. I said, Mike, man, listen, we got something here because this is really good. And that in those days, I was able to send him the audio. I'm like, listen to this. And as soon as you're done, call me. He calls me back. He's like, holy shit, that's really good. So I said, I'll tell you what, Mike. And it was right then and there. And it was always called the Suffering Podcast, always the same logo, always. But right then and there is when the Suffering Podcast was really born. I said, Mike, why don't you come in and be my co-host? Okay, and you and I we'll get people in here, and this whole thing will start running. The show is always about from day one, always about what it's about now. It's about overcoming adversity, overcoming suffering, using your suffering for power rather than thinking it's your weakness. And Mike and I recorded 174 episodes together. And I watched, when I buy into the stuff that I say, I buy in hook, line, and sinker. If you told me, I always make this joke where I was on a pursuit in order to heal myself in a way that you couldn't possibly imagine. I was reading 15 to 20 books a month. I was listening to other shows. Like my life was engulfed on trying to be better. But if you told me that the way to heal myself was to bend over, put my head between my legs and shove my head up my ass, I would have started stretching, right?
Right.
That's how extreme I was. While I bought into everything, I sat in harmonic eggs, I've done Reiki, I've done spiritual, whatever, I've done it all. Mike never really bought into it. He never really bought into it the same way I did. So on May 8th, him and I recorded a gentleman named Seth Gale for episode 183 of the Suffering Podcast. We're on video now, and things are going good. We got 15,000 subscribers at the time. Everything's rolling along. I'm traveling. I'm doing this show. I'm doing this show. I'm doing it. Things are going well. But I saw Mike's decline. So I watched Mike's life start to implode. He had gotten divorced. His kids weren't speaking to him. He was looking for comfort. As Johnny Lee once said, he's looking for love in all the wrong places. And after we record on May 9th, now Mike would come in drunk a lot, and I sort of just put up with it because I had made my peace with the fact that just let him ride it out. He's going to a sticky spot. Okay. Just keep this anchor of this show. That's all I wanted to do is keep the anchor of the show for him. So after we record, Mike was pretty drunk that night. We're in the parking lot as we normally do. We're just sitting there BSing until it's time to get in our cars and go home. And my father-in-law had just died. And he's asking me, Mike was Dr. Death. He loved to tell you when people died. That was his thing. He once called me to tell me somebody's horse died. It was actually kind of funny. Or somebody's donkey died. He's asking me where my father's funeral is. And I said, it's this place in Nutley. It's the W.M. Brown or something. Look it up. The address is there. And he's like, just send me the address. I'm like, just look. And I'm getting mad at him. I'm like, just look up the address. In back of my head, I'm like, you lazy. Come on, just look it up. Now, mind you, I go home, I attend to my wife and everything like that. But right before we leave, Mike, and I could tell you exactly where it was, what parking spot it was. He turns around to me and he goes, hey, Kev, I love you, right? Now, that was an odd thing for him to say because we always told each other we loved each other. But that night it was different. It was really, really different. So what had happened is he went home, and I have full knowledge of I have all the knowledge, unfortunately. And he went home, made 2 phone calls, a couple text messages, and his last text message was 12:30 a.m. So very early on Thursday morning, May 9th. My partner, my brother, and my best friend died from a single self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head in his basement apartment. And it crushed me. because here I am doing the best work I can, trying to pay it forward for all the help that was given to me. And I never, I didn't, I saw it, but I never really turned fully at him to look at my best friend just going down this slide. Um,
Have you given yourself grace on that?
I hold a lot of implicit guilt because I tell you what, there's a couple things that I should have done. And one of my other friends who knew Mike for 50 years, his name's Bobby Crudell. I have three friends that I lean on, and I'll say them very clearly. One of them is Tom Flynn, the other one's Mike DePalma, and the third one's Bobby Crudell. Bobby is very brash, Bobby is very harsh, but Bobby's got a heart of gold, and Bobby and I, we just get along. I know him. I know what type of person he is. I know whatever comes out of his mouth, forget it. I know what type of person he is. So him and I had a lot of conversations, and we both feel very, very guilty. But we tried to do certain things backhandedly. Like when we saw Mike was drinking too much, I came up with this idea. Bobby's in recovery for alcohol, and I bring him in on an episode. It's the suffering of sobriety. And basically, what Bobby and I did is we talked about Mike, but
Hmm.
not about Mike. So everything we were saying,
Right.
it's like
So he could relate to it, knowing like this is
uh,
me, but it's
it's
not
about
me.
9 episodes prior to Mike's last episode, and we wanted to turn the light on for him. But unfortunately, Mike wasn't a dumb guy, so he knew. I'm pretty sure he knew all that stuff was about him, but he never let on, and it certainly didn't land. That was the best thing we could come up with. But right before he took his life, the three of us or the four of us were on the phone constantly, and we were trying to come up with a plan because we knew the wheels were coming off. We actively had a plan. This is crazy. That Saturday, the Saturday after he took his life, before he did it, we had a plan that all three of us were going to show up at his house. All four of us were going to show up at his house, and we were going to kick the shit out of him until he went to rehab. That was our plan. That was what we were going to do. I don't care if he hates. It was time because I always I should have kicked Mike off the show and said, "Hey, look, this seat is always here for you, but I want the clean, sober, lucid Mike Falaise. I don't want this mess, this hot mess. This seat's always going to be here, but you got to get out of here and you got to go clean yourself up." But his life was imploding and everything was going away. I was afraid if I took that away from him, he was going to do something like he did. It
Right.
happened anyway. Um, so I hold a lot of implicit guilt when it comes to that.
And how do you work through that? Didn't you walk into church when you didn't really want to walk into church?
That was very, very early on in the podcast. Like I said, I buy into everything. Okay. I had this guy on, Adam Burt, and he's a professional hockey player. He's retired. I just saw him last night. And I
Good.
get him I get him on the show, episode 16. That's how long ago it was. And I just recorded another one with him because he came out with a book called The Longest Game. And he comes in here and I meet him for coffee once, and I'm a big sports guy, so listen, I'm all in on that stuff. I, I I'm sitting there having coffee from him, and we're talking and talking, and about a day after that, he sends me a text message, says, "Hey KD, I love you and I'm praying for you." And it got me so mad. Like I was like, "Who the hell are you? Who do you think you are? You're gonna pray for me?" But it stuck with me all week. And we record him that Saturday, and the next Saturday, and I switched around what the episode was. I was going to call it the suffering of a hockey player. It went to be the suffering of a man of God, and he just affected me in a way. But I'm very supportive of my guests. I'm always very supportive of my guests. And so what I did was I went to his church, which is not that far from me. It's like 10 minutes away from where I live. I walk in there and we're all masked up. It's during COVID. And I felt something, right? I felt good. I had my kids with me. They were my get out of jail free card. I was going to say, one of them went to the bathroom in their pants. I got to leave. Um, but I felt something. And that was 4 years ago. And I haven't missed a moment since. As a matter of fact, after our deacon passed, they made me deacon of the church, I have leaned into my faith harder than I ever have in my entire life. I was baptized, I was saved, and when I first walked in the church, this is the different perspective. It's a non-denominational Christian church, and I watched people when the worship leader Kim Frias is singing. I watch people put their hands in the air, and I remember turning to my son. I go, "What the hell is this? This is weird. This is crazy." Um, After about a month of being there, I changed my perspective. I'm like, what are they feeling that they are just free to put up their hands, not caring what anybody thinks of them? It's a feeling inside that raises their hands up. And I said, that's actually pretty beautiful. Now, if you come to church, you'll see I'm one of those freaks with their hands in the air because I feel it. But after Mike's death, one of the first people I called after the initial, because I found out at 3 in the morning on Friday the 10th, because he was dead for a whole day before they found him. First person I called was my pastor. And now Adam had met Mike and I at the same time. And what he said to me gave me a little bit of peace. He said, "Kevin, I met you and Mike." I'm going to do exactly what he did. He goes, "I met you and Mike at the same spot." He goes, "Then I watched you find your faith, and I watched this, and I watched Mike just fall down. And the further you found your faith, the further away you and Mike got." And he was right. He was 100% correct. Um, but yeah, I hold a lot of guilt for Mike's death. I don't, I'll never get over it. But there's also things that Mike was doing prior to his death that I'll never let out because I still feel responsible for him. I still feel like I need to protect him. There's some things that don't ever need to come out. So I'm going to hold that. I'm going to hold that stuff, and I'm going to do my best to keep his memory alive for all the good things, because there was many good things that he was involved in, and many good things that he was. He just lost his way.
Well, we learn that when we are saved. We're all broken. We're all flawed. Jesus died for our sins. However, you and I understand of taking the guilt onto somebody else's actions, and it's hard when we sort of. I use the word pacify, or oh, it's just a phase, or it's just the darkness. You'll get through it, and it is tough because we carry it on because we've gotten through it. We know who we are and how we continue to try to pay it forward to other people that are struggling, because we all struggle.
Well, the funny
And
thing is
you're
the closer you get to God, the dirtier you feel. Be,
oh,
because
absolutely,
you start
absolutely.
to see what clean is, and you're like, Mike, I didn't think,
Hmm.
wow, I was filthy. And that's what it does. And that's when you start to shed all that stuff. You start to shed that mask. You start to shed that.
All those
All,
masks, all that stuff, because you realize also Jesus died for our sins, and for us to be completely clean, well, we'll be dead and we'll be with God. But we have to go through all that, and I wish, I've done the coulda, woulda, shouldas, and one day, sorry, my dog's catching flies over here. One day I'll share my story when it's ready to come out, the whole story. But your suffering podcast, you started it with first responders, but now you bring all sorts of people on there because everybody
it's the
suffers.
one
And to
it's the
understand,
one common thing that every human being on planet Earth has. We all have our junk. And here's the cool thing, right? So here's the thing that really gives me hope. If you were to tell me that, no, my life's been good. I'm a good person. I had a good life. I had good everything, good this, good that, good that. Number one, I wouldn't believe you, because there's no person on planet Earth that doesn't have their junk. But I can't also, if that's true, I can't connect with you, because I can't connect with anybody that doesn't have some stuff in their past. And you can walk up to a person and they can tell you everything's all sunshine and rainbows, but if you have seen the darkness, you've seen the beast, that they're not telling you everything. And then and that sort of draws you to them. So my friends, my best friends in the world, they're train wrecks. They're train wrecks, but I love them. I love them, and I've built this trust. So there is some beauty out of the ashes. Okay, Mike took his life. And because Mike was in that same spot that I was, where his peripheral vision was here. Well, here's what it's done for me. I now see the carnage that his suicide has taken. I see everything that I couldn't see myself when I was in that spot. And what it's done is it's given me a fresh look at everything. Um, but my friends and I, we have, if you can believe this, three guys who are about as close as guys can get. We will lean into each other when we're having a bad day. Those are the people that I call. Like I actually have that trust with them to say, "Hey, man," and it happened to me. So just recently, going back to Bobby, something came up on my Facebook memories, and it was the 4th anniversary of the airing of episode 9, first episode that Mike came on, and I was doing pretty good. I was having a great day, and this popped up, and it sort of just sent me into a tailspin. I made a commitment after Mike died not to anesthetize his pain because I need to sit here. I need to feel this stuff. I need to remember what this feels like. I just told somebody the other day, I used to box when I was a kid, and I said, you know what? I need to get a punch in the mouth because I forgot what it was like. And it's kind of the same thing here. Time moves on, time heals, but you never want to forget what that felt like, because if you don't ever forget what that felt like, then if you forget, then you're doomed to repeat it. And that's one of the things you have to learn from history like that. So the four of us have become this cohesive group that we can trust each other enough to let this in. And each person has their own way of getting through it. Each person has their own way of doling out some help to you. I've been the strong one, because that's the bottom line. My faith, and on most days I am strong, but there are days that I'm not strong, and I lean into somebody who's a little stronger than me, where I might be the strong one and they have to lean into me. And it happens every single day. Um, but that's the beauty of real friends. But it took me 50 years to find a real tribe. And, I'm grateful that I found it. I'm grateful that I have that tribe, because what's going to happen? I know these guys are supportive, and we're all in for each other. But I also know that I can call these people. Now, you have two types of friends in your life, right? You have those friends you can call 9 to 5, and they'll be there for you, and they'll give you what you want. But then there's those types of friends where you can call at 3 in the morning, and before you tell them why you need them, they're getting their pants on, they're getting their keys ready, and they're grabbing a shovel because they're pretty sure they're going to have to bury a body for you. Like, those are the friends that I have. They're maniacs, but I love them dearly. And it took me a long time to find those friends, and thankfully I did.
Well, I mean, for me, and I think, sorry, my dog's going nuts, but my dog goes nuts on every episode. Um, we always surround ourselves growing up in the old, when we're younger, lots of people, lots of people, lots of people, lots of friends, all that. And the older we get, and especially when we go through situations, we're already judging ourselves. We're already hard on ourselves. So many times we put that mask. How are you doing? I'm fine. I'm fine, which is the biggest fucking lie you can even say to somebody. But then when you find your tribe, or you allow yourself to start leaning in with no mask, allowing yourself to go through emotions, being vulnerable, you start to really see who is there. And for me, I have actually been surprised of who's there. It's not, many times it's not people I thought would be there. It's people I would have never thought would be
There's
there.
3 words that I never accept. So when I ask you how you are, if you say fine, good, okay, like, nah, you're gonna do better than that. I can't accept. I don't accept that.
Okay, I've been saying I'm doing okay. Oh, okay. I'm doing good.
Do it. People do it all the time, but you're not.
I know.
When somebody answers you in the monosyllabic reply, they are not okay. They are not
No.
good. They're
Well,
not fine.
especially when they say I'm
Yeah.
fine. That's so after Mike's, you had the Suffering Podcast, the nonprofit.
Yes.
You had started it, but it had not really gotten feet, correct? And then you went back to it. So tell me a little bit, share about the Suffering Podcast into Development Project.
So Mike and I, one of the things about hurt people always want to help other people. All right, they want to do good for other people because that makes you feel good. It makes you feel It gives you purpose. You know, the opposite, the antonym of depression is not happiness. No, it's purpose. That's what it is. So Mike and I, we always wanted to do more. So we came up with this idea to help people through a nonprofit. Right, and that's the best way to do it. So we started Dental Development Project. Now, um, God bless his soul, but Mike was a great idea person, but as far as putting the work in, was a little shy on that. So we did some good things there. We gave out a lot of money. We gave out scholarships. We did a bunch of stuff, but it got very overwhelming. So after Mike's passing, some of my close friends say, "Hey, let's start up the nonprofit." It was just dormant. You know, we never got rid of it. It was just dormant. Let's start up the nonprofit. So we had to redo some paperwork, and we changed the name to the Suffering Podcast Dental Development to sort of tie it into the podcast. And we're just about to give out. Mike cared about two things: Seton Hall Prep, which was his high school, and football. So we got together, we raised money, we had a fundraiser, and we started the Mike Falace Memorial Scholarship Fund. And what it's going to do, we're getting submissions as we speak. The submission closing date is March 15th, and what it's for is a football player from Seton Hall, who Seton Hall costs money. We're going to award two $1,000 scholarships to just a football player. And what they have to do is they have to write what's the value of athletics as it pertains to education, but it's got to be handwritten and 500. It's 500 words. That's all it is. But in addition to the 500 words, they
No chat
no
GBT.
chat GPT. That's what I listen. If they do it, I have ways of finding out. Um, but one of the things that I wanted them to do was then they had to do 250 words on who was Mike Falace. So that's my opportunity, because Mike was a staple at Seton Hall football games. He was 58 years old, and he was at every football game that he could possibly go to. So I wanted to keep his name alive. So that was the way for me to keep. Then they have to do some research on, okay, who's Mike Falace? Well, all they got to do is talk to some people, and then his name just keeps rolling around. Okay, that was my way to pay homage to my best friend. And we're just about to start reviewing submissions. That'll be awarded on April 15th.
So, how did you come about your best selling book? And I love it because, man, you are crazy. We all are crazy. And people who know me remember the Gnarls Barkley song that came out. That was used to be, people would hear it and they'd be like, oh my gosh, that's Christy.
Yeah.
That was my song. Um,
I had a friend of mine.
explain,
Oh,
explain that because, mental health, it doesn't, for me, it doesn't matter. You're obviously the police and everything like that. And my passion from our first responders, I have seen the mental health hardness that they go through. But how did you come about that? And how was that? How did, I guess my question is, when you're writing a book, are you sitting, I mean, and obviously you're anal and probably very OCD,
mhm.
and I'm sure I'm going to find out more. But do you just sit down and you just go, and or how did you go about doing that?
So the story was the story, okay? And what I found out through this journey of podcasting and telling my story and going on other shows and stuff, I found other people reaching me on the back end. They message me on social media. I go out and do speaking. They'll come up to me afterwards, and there's comfort in knowing that somebody else has gone through something similar. So in an attempt to reach a wider audience, it kind of came by. It was very fortuitous how it happened. Um, a woman who just reached out to me, who I knew vaguely through other people, and she got me in contact with Chris Anderson. Chris Anderson was on TV. He was a homicide detective in Birmingham, Alabama, and we found that we had a lot of similarities in how we dealt with certain things and how we dealt with trauma. Um, but my portion of the book that I wrote, when I was told that, hey, listen, they gave me a book deal. Okay, write the book. I need X amount of words, and it wasn't even a lot of words. I think the first call was like, give me 5,000 words, and it was a month. In 3 days, I gave them 22,000 words, and it just poured. It's like I threw up this whole thing. So that's how Man You're Crazy was written. It was literally written in 3 days, and it's pretty close to what you see in the book. Obviously, it's gone through several edits, um, and that was how I wrote that book. I am
I would show the cover, but I have somebody reading it right
well.
now.
I actually keep a cover, so that's the cover right there.
There you go.
But subsequently to that, I've written, I don't know, 30 or 40 articles for various different magazines. When I start writing, um, I have a method of writing where it will pour out of me. I'll have a subject matter, and it'll just pour out of me. I am almost done my second book, um, and it's going about to go into the editing process. That one's a little different. How I wrote that one, I wrote that one in piecemeal. So when I wrote, the way I wrote that book is, I don't write it linear. I didn't write Man You're Crazy linear either. It's not like this happened and this happened and this happened. I just think about something and I'll write about that. And then afterwards I'll arrange it. It's easier to do it in post edit. Um, but I'm looking forward to the next book that comes out, because it's while this all what I wanted this to be was a guide, was a manual on how to make it through. The other one is talking more about what success looks like. Um, I can give you an exclusive if you want one.
I would love
Okay.
one signed, of
No,
course.
no, no, no. I'll give you an
Um,
exclusive on the title, because nobody knows what the title is.
oh, if you want
So the
to.
title of my next book will be Post Traumatic Success, and we
All
will
right.
explore what success.
I still want a signed
Yeah,
copy,
no
but
problem.
yeah.
I I, I it's funny because many people don't know what success looks like after trauma.
Hmm.
And that's what this next book explores, and it gets pretty deep, because there's some, as much as I like to think I dropped the mask, there are certain things that I still hold up there. There are certain things that I don't let out, because I'm not ready. It's not because I'm hiding it away, I'm embarrassed by it. I'm just not ready. I can't, because I haven't fully forgiven people or myself for other things. So there's many things that are going to come out in this book that, you know they're harsh. They're very, very harsh. Um,
Well, we're all on, you're on a journey until you
yep.
die. So you're not about the dropping the mask. I mean, for me, I wore so many masks because I was always looking outside of myself for affirmation. I didn't even know who I was. And then
I still don't know.
when I
I
finally
still don't
started,
know who I am.
who I,
I don't know who I am.
but,
I don't care.
but you're younger. I didn't get it until I was 60. So, we got 10 years, but but I evolve I mean, since we met a year ago, I've evolved from, and I'm blessed to call you my friend because of friendships that bring, they peel the mask off me to say, it's okay. You're safe. And having, going back to Bobby and all those guys, having them around you, you don't have to wear masks with them. And being safe, especially when you've had PTSD, and PTSD is just not for first responders. I had PTSD from being raped. Um, and going through shock of somebody did, you can go through PTSD on that. So having PTSD, you tend to, for me, you tend to lose the trust, and having people around you that allow you to trust yourself first.
So post traumatic stress, if you're going to do a deep dive into it, there's a difference between post traumatic stress and chronic or complex post traumatic stress.
Right.
Um,
Yours was cool. Well, I mean,
there's
everybody has different
there's
levels.
many different levels. The chronic or the complex, that starts when you're a child. And it's how you dealt with it. Those people, what I found, just knowing enough people with post-traumatic stress, and I call it post-traumatic stress because I don't like the word disorder. The word disorder sort of sticks in you. It makes you think like you got something wrong
Right.
with you. You don't. And actually, psychologists now and therapists are starting to drop that D from post-traumatic stress because a disorder is something that your body doesn't normally do. When you go through the symptoms of post-traumatic stress, where it's impulse control, bang, anxiety, canceling, all that stuff, that's the body's normal reaction. So it's not a disorder. It's really not a disorder, and it's the body's natural reaction to trauma. Um, but I have seen this firsthand. People who grew up in households that were loving, nurturing, supportive have a much easier time. It's not that they don't get post traumatic stress, but they have a much easier time at it not being a lifelong thing. I know I will always have it. I still don't like bangs. I cannot be anywhere near a gun. There are certain things I'm incredibly OCD because what that does in my head is it turns a chaotic life in and gives it some order. As crazy as it sounds, um, those small little things. Listen, I'm not Howard Hughes where I wash my hands 70 times and wear a tissue box on my feet, but I've eaten with the same fork for about 30 years.
That's interesting to
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
So, and then you and I can, you will be back because I had your partner, Sherry, on. She's going to be showing up
Wonderful woman.
and we're going to have some, oh, I love her. Um, but I want to wrap this up because I know it's late in your
Well,
time and it's a Friday
so
night.
just real quickly. So Sherry, who has a horrifying story, um, Sherry and I travel around the country and we train police departments. We do speaking
Mhm.
around the country. Our first one this year is going to be in Anaheim, California on March 18th. Um, and then we're going to Louisiana, to Tennessee, to Arizona, to Pennsylvania, to Texas. I mean, we're all over the place. Oh, actually, we're going to Maui this year, which is kind of interesting.
Well, and you're also doing a mental health retreat for men, which really needs to be. They need to be more open. Men need to feel safe to be around men to be
Hmm.
vulnerable.
And they need a
And
space where there's no judgment, and they have to be in front of people who are willing to talk about their own stuff so they have some sort of connection.
so I want to thank you so much. Um, I've learned through many conversations with you. So I've learned so much from you,
Be
but
careful what you learn. You don't want to succeed at the wrong
no,
thing, and I may tell you the wrong thing.
no, because you continue to allow me to look outside of the box and knowing that, there's nothing more liberating than being my true self. I mean, my business is called Authentic Brand. However, there's times where, and I did for the last 10 years, I wore masks to protect other people, um, and ashamed and everything like that. But understanding that when you start talking about it, you're not alone. And yes, I've got that guilt as well, that coulda, woulda, shouldas. However, I have to lean into those that I call my friends, and even people that, when I share my story, they're like, I feel safe. I can share my story with you. Because each of our experiences, when we speak about it, it allows other people to know that they're safe and they're not alone
Well, sort
and that we're all broken.
sort of put a bow on everything. It's one of the things that came to me after Mike passed. I am a big believer that any type of pain, you should be running straight towards that pain, because if you run away from it, you anesthetize it. It's not going away. It's not going to get any better, and eventually, it's going to grow until you cannot control it. After Mike died, I just kept this thing kept resonating, and it was on loop in my head, and I just kept saying, all he had to do was just say, I'm not doing this shit today. And then the sun's going to rise tomorrow. So what I did was, it was enough in my head where I said it on the initial post when I notified our audience that Mike had taken his life. I said, hey, just whatever you're going to do, whatever thoughts are in your head, just don't do it today. Just not today. And then it picked up steam. Not today, not today, not today. And I talk about that. I end every Instagram live with not today. I talk every post I put up, it's got not today in there somewhere. Um, and it's a different way to live your life where you're going to have times, you're going to have seasons where you're low. You're going to have seasons when you're high. Don't let the lows get too low. Don't let the highs get too high. But whatever happens, make sure that your consequences, you just don't do it today. Just deal with it tomorrow, because tomorrow, after you get some sleep, after the sun rises, you're going to think about it with a clear head, with new eyes, and it just might save your life.
And bottom line, tomorrow's a new day. In the dark, we always get light. The light will always shine. So thank you,
Thank you,
Kevin.
Christy.
I appreciate you so much. And not today.
God bless.